All of this happened 8 years ago in the summer of 2015. My name is Alan. And all of this happened not only to me, but also to my then fiancée, now wife, Rachel. At this point, we had been together for 5 years. And 1 month earlier, in May, I proposed to her and she said yes. Now, a month later, me and her decided to go out for one of our date nights, and we decided to go to a local bar for once, a place that we have been before a couple of times. But this particular evening would eventually change a lot of our perspective. Considering what happened this particular evening, I don't blame Rachel that she didn't want to go back to this bar ever since. But we have actually been there, and I can say this, I still don't blame her from going back there. But ever since then, nothing has ever happened like this before, ever since. But this particular evening was a Friday. Since we had just had got off of work and we got home, we changed, and we decided to go to the bar since it wasn't that far from our apartment. So we actually walked there. It took about maybe less than 10 minutes from our apartment. When we walked in, some of the regulars and the bartenders saw us and welcomed in us as usually. We went to the bar, grabbed a drink, and we sat down with our tables, and we even started talking to some of the regulars that we have become friends with. But after maybe half an hour, we just sit there talking and even had ordered some type of food, because this bar was not only a bar, but also had a small kitchen that served burgers, fries, you name it. So we ordered a burger, some fries, and some beers. And during the first half an hour we were sitting here, we actually had a good time. We talked about our days, and we even talked to some of the regulars. But as the night was going on, I decided to use the restroom. And as I was in there, this is a part of Rachel's perspective, since I wasn't even there when this happened. Rachel went up to the bar to ask for another drink. As she was waiting for a drink, a guy walked up to her and asked for her name and asked how her night has been so far. At first, he was actually very polite and very pleasant to talk to. Turned out he was a little bit older than us. He was actually 30 years old, and his name was Michael. And as she got her drink and was about to go back to her table, she did. Just as she sat down, Michael walked up to her and asked if he could sit down. She said no, because she was already with someone, and he didn't see anyone even near her table, and he sat down anyways. She felt a little bit uncomfortable, but she brushed it off and hoping that I will show up soon enough so I could tell him off to leave. And for the first couple of minutes when he sat down, he tried to make a short small talk, like just asking, mostly like not too personal questions, thank for that, but just asking her day had been and what she liked to do, and if she has been to this bar often. She answered truthfully. She said that her day was been good, and that she is a regular to this bar, but not too often, but as often as she can. And by that point, I showed up at the table, and I looked confused to see a different guy at the table, and I looked at Rachel and shook her head to meaning as a sign that she didn't know him. And I asked him who he is. He said that his name is Michael and that he'd just been talking to Rachel, and he asked who I am. I said, well, sir, this is my fiancée. He didn't believe me. I was like, dude, if you were her fiancée, you shouldn't have left this beautiful girl alone. So just leave. I will talk to this lady right now. I was furious, but I tried to act calm because I didn't want to cause any particular scene, even though this is not relevant, but eventually did happen. I decided just telling Rachel that we should leave. As she was about to stand up, he grabbed her arm and said, "You sit down, lady. We're not done talking, and the night is still young." I told him that this is my fiancée, and if she wants to leave, she wants to leave. But he said, "No, I will let her go when I want to let her go. Not before, not until my word." I was getting a bit angrier for every second there. But I did still didn't want to cause any problem. After all, this guy was probably a little bit shorter than myself. He was probably 5'5". I was about 6'2", so I could easily been overtower him. But I walked back to the bar and asked one of the bartenders named Simon. I told Simon that this guy at our table is making Rachel feeling uncomfortable and won't let her go from the table until he is done talking to her. Simon looked and realized who he was talking to, and he sighed and said, "Not again." I asked, "Not again?" He told me Michael was basically a regular at this bar, and he's been doing this to almost every single woman he approached, but not the ones that either with two other women, or if it is that if she has a man around her the whole time, but if it's a single woman, despite if it's a bar, a table, or one of those pool tables in the back, he always tried to seduce them or try to act like a nice guy, and just he couldn't stand that anymore. I asked Simon why did he haven't banned him from the bar. He said, well, as long as he so far hasn't even caused any serious problem, despite making a lot of women feeling uncomfortable. He told me that only about a year earlier, he actually approached one particular woman that was quite a regular at this bar, and he didn't mention by name, but when he described her, like when I asked how she looked like, well, it gave some base, vague descriptions, and then I realized he might have figured out who was talking about. But anyways, he made that woman so uncomfortable, and that when he allowed her to go, she told Simon how she felt, and that she's no longer going back to this bar as long as this guy is there. And in fact, I actually knows what she meant, because based on what Simon told me, that lady hasn't been back to the bar because some of her friends goes there and had told her that he's still present almost every single week, like Friday to Sunday. I was like, this is really uncomfortable. I told Simon if it's possible that they could telling him to just leave my fiance alone, but Simon told me that he didn't want to be that much involved, which I completely understand. I mean, I don't want to have him to lose his own job, but I told him if it's possible if it's possibility that they could do something, maybe to ask a bouncer, which they have one. He told me that he will go to ask the bouncer to have and talk to Michael. The bouncer came and walked up to Michael, told him to leave Rachel alone, and he said that he would in a minute. The bouncer nodded and left. And as Michael just stood up and just went back to the restrooms, I walked up to the table and said, "Rachel, we are leaving right now." And as we left, I heard almost a loud voice from in the bar. It's like, "Where's my girlfriend?" he asked. Simon denied that he had no idea what he was talking about, and even the other regulars denied that even had any idea what he talked about. We managed to walk back to our apartment fast from that place, because every time I always look backwards just to make sure that this Michael guy wouldn't follow us. Luckily though, he didn't. We decided not to go back to the bar for the next week. But then after a week after that, we went back to the bar, and I asked Simon if Michael had been back there and even asked about Rachel. He nodded and said that when he said to me, frightened me. Based on what Michael told to Simon, that next time when he's seeing Rachel, he will grab her and just take off with her from the bar to his place to have his way to do it. But Simon didn't believe that Michael was even that stupid or even that crazy to even just do that in front of a public bar, and especially if it was crowded. But luckily though, me and Rachel went to this bar that evening, but we never saw Michael. But the next day, on the Saturday, around the same time when we walked in, we sat at the bar just talking, and suddenly, who walks in? Or rather than Michael. He scanned around the room and saw Rachel at the bar, smiled and walked up, but he saw me. It didn't like he saw me and stopped, but still walked up to us again. Tried and walked by me, sat down next to Rachel and asked how her night had been, if she wanted to go back with his place. She tried to ignore him, but he said, "Don't try to ignore me, woman. You will have my attention if I wanted to." And Simon said, "Michael, this is your final warning. We have given you so many warnings." "Ah, bad. Back off. Don't mind your own business." But then I said, "Rachel, do you really want to be with a guy who like this?" She said, "No, he's not my type anyways." I should mention this. Rachel doesn't mind to speak about what's on her mind. In fact, she is brave enough. And I wouldn't even stop her if she would end up in a fight. Because she has a black belt in Taekwondo. And that's one thing I didn't should mention to Michael but luckily though I didn't. And Michael was fumous red in his face. And it's like, "How dare you to speak to me like that way, lady? You and me living right now." And she was like, "I'm not going with anywhere with you, you creep." She actually had the nerve to call him that. But basically, he was a complete creep. That made him even more angry and more red in his face. "Lady, I have done a lot of things to women in my years, but never has anyone even dared to call me a creep." And I said, "Dude, you are a creep. How dare you even to walk up to someone's fiancée like this? She isn't your fiancée, she's mine." He was so delusional that she was dating him. But then I told Simon, "Bowser, right now." He nodded and called for the Bowser. But before anyone could do anything, Michael pulled out a pocket knife and said, "You, sir, will have your heart stabbed right now." And he's talking to me. He was threatening to kill me so that he felt like if I was out of the picture, Rachel would be going with him no matter what. But I sit there like calmly, like I was actually calm. And I was like, "No matter what you do, go ahead." Before he was about to stab me, Rachel grabbed his arm and pushed him right on the floor, and he was stunned like, has anyone ever done this before to him, apparently? No. She told him to back off or she will stab him in his private area. That made him even angrier. "How dare you?" He stood up, but before he could do anything, she punched him in the stomach and fell down on his butt again. But then the Bowser walked in, and luckily for what he didn't know, that the owner was actually in the back office with the manager and heard his commotion. He knew all about Michael's past, so he told Michael now that he is banned for life. That made him even furious, but he said, "If you even dare to show up, we have the police on you next time." So the Bowser just grabbed him and threw him out. You may think this is the last time we ever saw or even heard about Michael. Oh no. We both first believed that as well, but this is far from over. But we went back to the bar for the next couple of weeks, and in fact, during the first week after Michael was banned, there was a lot of talks about him. Turns out that he was, let's say, a drug addict. Turned out he was smoking a lot of meth. And turned out he was smoking meth even before he always showed up at the bar, hoping that will to boost his confidence to manage to get a lady from the bar no matter what. But it's always end up being rejection. But after almost like a month after this, me and Rachel went back to the bar just talking as normal after work on a Friday. And as we were sitting here, I told her I would just had to use the restroom for only for a brief moment, and she nodded. But as I was away, once again, from Rachel's perspective, but she told me what happened. As the bartender Simon was not noticed it, but a man walked in, and he walked straight up to Rachel's and my table and sat down before Rachel could even notice it before, and then he said, "Hello, Rachel. How are you doing tonight?" And she recognized the voice. Michael. Somehow he had put on some disguise so that he wouldn't be recognized by the staff by like the Bowser or Simon. She was petrified. She knew what things would happen if she tried to do something to draw attention. So she acted cool, and even though she was scared, but she was comfortable that she could do anything to protect herself. "So, where is your supposed fiancé?" He smiled. "In the restroom." "Thanks." And he walked up to the restroom, and then she realized what's happening. She called for Simon, and he realized she looked scared and said, "What?" "Michael." And she pointed at the restroom, and she pointed and said, "Alan." And then she heard commotion, and suddenly, bang, bang. She first believed that maybe that someone has smashed into the walls or this toilet stalls, but turned out later on was gunshots. Michael had brought a small revolver with him to the bar, hoping to find me, to kill me, so that I could be out of picture, so that he could take Rachel with him. But what he didn't know, that when he was high on meth, he was loudly shot. He shot the walls twice. And with that, I managed to punch him right in the throat, which made him fall backwards. At the time, the Bowser and Simon ran in, hold him down, and someone actually called the police, and long story short, they arrested him. And Wheeler didn't have to go to the trial because, well, based on our testimony or witness statement from the police on the scene, we would later find out that he was given at least 12 years in jail, not for attempt at murder, but also being in a possession of legal drugs and threatening other people for a long time. And yeah, so basically, Michael ended up behind bars for a long time. But that was not when I would later find out about 2 years later, he had been sentenced to life without parole. You may have asked why or how. Well, it turned out he stabbed one of the inmates to death in jail. So that gives him a permanent residence in jail. So at least one of the outside world would not have to be getting worried about Michael's addicts again. Well, like I said earlier, me and Rachel decided to stay away from the bar for a while since after all this happened. So we focused on mostly our lives together, like finding a house. We even got married, but in the summer 2016, we actually did invite some of the regulars from the bar, include Simon. And well, we have been married ever since. It has been a great time. I mean, we are still been married for about 7 years, and we actually have even 2 daughters of our own by now. And we are hoping to telling our daughters about this story when they're old enough to understand the seriousness about going out and as a way to protect them. In fact, Rachel was the one who actually got them into Taekwondo in the first place, so I'm hoping that they will keep up the training and one day get a black belt like their mom. And how to say, Rachel is the a angel in a black belt. She is not a one person that you don't want to mess around. Even though we know this, Michael is a character, is a guy, a man that he will never be released from jail. Well, Michael, you are a place that you really belong to be at. So, yeah, no one else would ever be experience anything like from you ever again.